I'm going to talk about the Frankfurt Kitchen. Had any of you ever heard of it before?
No.
No, neither had I either, till I came across it in a podcast. And it's just, I think, really fascinating. And it's to do with somebody called Margarete, here she is, Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky, who lived to the age of nearly within three days of being 103.
Gosh.
So she had quite an amazing life. I think she was a pioneer. She was the first female architect in Austria. She was a technological innovator with the kitchen. She fought the Nazis in World War II. Well, amazing. I'd never heard of her. But this is her. So she was the first to build a kitchen after a unified concept. That is a low-cost design that would enable efficient work. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on initially. There she is, Margarete Grete. She was known as Lihotzky. Helped build Red Vienna, fought the Nazis. I wonder, I don't know whether it was from this photo. I thought she might be Jewish, but she isn't. She wasn't, well, as far as I know. Couldn't find out any more about it. By what was in key with the what was known as the scientific management. I'm sure some of you have heard of that, Taylorism as it was known, which tried to do it. It was known particularly for the using stopwatches to check how long people took to do things, and became quite an oppressive technology, I think, eventually. But anyway, it became a design classic. This is an old film, which has not got music. I've just added the music to it to make it a bit more interesting, which shows, it starts off with a picture, as you can see here, of the old kitchen and a woman looking fairly Victorian in it as well. And then it changes halfway to like a flapper becoming involved. You'll see. There she comes, a new one. And that's the Frankfurt Kitchen, all ergonomically designed. Had a built-in cooker, which was very new. That's pouring the flour and various things. That's the waste one that you can use. Mixer tap. Fold down ironing board, which is quite useful. I always hated mixing those up. And this is the way it looked like, the kitchen there and the room that was going to be used. Looking at the ergonomic, that was the old-fashioned one. And this is the one that they developed, a specialist kitchen attached to it. There it is. Anyway, it was only spaced because they mass-produce these and mass-produce the components of them as well. And this is a reconstruction of the Frankfurt Kitchen in the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna. But it wasn't that color originally, though they were blue, apparently because blue wasn't attractive to flies. Just one of the other pieces of research that they found. But it was only 1.9 meters by 3.4 meters long. And it wasn't just due to the space constraint. It was a conscious design to reduce the number of steps needed when working in the kitchen, as well as reducing the walking distance between the kitchen and the table in the adjacent room via the addition of a sliding door.
It's rather nice, isn't it? What all those handles must be little.
I'll come on to those. The Yeah, this I think was the original colour, which is a bit like the kind of very green that's very popular in Chorlton at the moment.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Chorlton green.
The Chorlton green, yeah. It was though I'll come on to the critiques of it as well, because it was thought it was maybe not flexible enough. The dedicated storage bins, those are the things you see on the right, and we'll come on to them in a bit more detail. And they were built on ammunition containers in the First World War, and they're made of aluminium, and you could have flour or anything else in them and then pour from them, as you'll see in a minute. But they were also, one of the problems with those drawers is that they were easily reachable by children. So they could take them out and spread it all over the floor. But I imagine, being good Austrian and German children, they didn't do that kind of thing. I don't know. And it was only really room for one person cooking, which tends to make a rather stereotyped view of be the woman doing that. But anyway, it did become a model for the modern fitted kitchen. So it was going to be efficient, functional. It was modelled after railway dining car kitchens, which I suppose it could also be said nowadays to things like the caravans and things like that. I'm always marvel at caravans and where everything is so carefully worked out, isn't it? So you close one thing and another thing becomes accessible. And it was intended to be used as a cooking workroom and divided from the sitting room. Time motion studies, interviews with housewives and women's groups to optimize the layout and workflow. She also considered hygiene, ventilation, lighting, and ergonomics. But you can see those are the containers, and you pull them out and they're easily pourable. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Which is not really design that caught on though, that one, is it? But it's certainly interesting though.
It's all very IKEA.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. It isn't that far away, is it, from there? And there you can see somebody using it with a nice bob haircut, using one of those to pour out the flour or whatever it was. So it came complete with furniture and major appliances, such as the stove, which was a novelty at the time. The wooden door and drawer fronts were painted blue initially because they found they didn't attract flies. And so they tried to uncover one best method for performing each particular task. They used oak wood for the flour containers because it repelled mealworms, and beech for tabletops because beech is resistant to staining, acids, and scratching. The seating was a revolving stool on casters for maximum flexibility. There's the electric stove that they had. Not that dissimilar to ones that you can probably remember as being in houses that you moved into and immediately got rid of, presumably, to fit it with a modern one. And this is Frederick Winslow Taylor, who is the proponent of scientific management. He was aiming to see how he timed how workers did particular jobs in order to maximize that, but then was very insistent that the benefits should be shared with the workers through piecework. Later on, of course, the time and motion studies were implemented without any benefit to the workers whatsoever. It became very contentious with the unions. So it wasn't by no means an uncontested form of analysis. So this is the original diagram. You can see the kitchen is on the right, and so no single step or reach of the arm was unnecessary. And you can see the benefits of that. I think I can remember something called the golden triangle in the kitchen. Do you remember that? It was, I think, to do with the three main things: the oven, the sink, and what was the other one?
The fridge.
The fridge, that's right. To be as near to each other, so you weren't going any distance between the three of them. So it's something that continued. I think one problem with the fitted kitchen, I remember when we moved in here and we had a fitted kitchen put in, there was a really nice cooker, a gas cooker that had a wonderful grill that was eye level and you could use, and all these fitted ones, they were all down there, and there was no really easy grill that you could use. So there was some loss in it. And a friend of mine took the old cooker off me and used it in his house because he decided not to go with a fitted kitchen and was very smug about it. So it isn't always necessarily better. It was also at the time when I suppose scientific management was in favor of paneling in doors, internal doors and staircases. And we spent the first couple of years here pulling them all off and restoring the doors. And again, something else that was familiar. So, and the argument behind fitting those over these wonderful doors that you had was that it made cleaning easier. And I never found cleaning a door was that much of a problem, really. But there you go. Anyway, this was the workflow analysis that she had of the various things. And that's the kitchen cabinet, Frankfurt Kitchen's kitchen cabinet, which again, in a nice shade of bit more like teal. That teal's my favorite color at the moment. I think it's wonderful. It's also, there was an exhibition of it at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art at New York. And that's there. I don't know whether they bought an original one and installed it, but it was installed in the Museum of Modern Art. And a quote from Grete Lihotzky: first, life is work, and secondly, it is relaxing and company and pleasures. But critiques of it also came in as well, which are quite legitimate. I think this is a problem because what she was replacing was an old joint room, which was both everybody lived in and worked in, including the kitchen, and it certainly wasn't very practical. But also the argument against the Frankfurt Kitchen was built on a mass-produced level, was it was too small and cramped, difficult to accommodate new appliances or technologies like dishwashers, and also maybe too rigid or boring. And it didn't actually, whilst it was involved in participants in designing it, it didn't bother getting any feedback later on it. And also, it obviously reflects gender stereotypes. It became part of a contested vision of modernity. And once the Nazis took over in Austria, they got rid of all that. All the idea of building social housing disappeared at the time. And that was the end of that. So this is her experience. After that, she joined this Red Brigade of Ernst May's going to Moscow, and they were credited with the construction of 20 cities, new cities, under Stalin's 5-year plan at the time in the 1930s, including the industrial city of Magnitogorsk in the southern Urals, which went from huts to a town of 220,000 in about 2 or 3 years. But in 1938, we're getting close to World War II, she moved to Istanbul, Turkey, where a lot of refugees from the Nazis were, to teach at the Academy of Fine Arts. She joined the Austrian Communist Party and traveled back on December 1940 back to Vienna to secretly contact the Austrian Communist resistance movement and help set up a communication line with Istanbul. However, it didn't go that well. She met Gerber at the Café Victoria in 22nd of January 41, where they were surprised and arrested by the Gestapo only 25 days after arrival. She was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment and taken to a prison in Bavaria, liberated by a United States troop in April 1945. Interestingly, she'd been generally ignored. It was only in the 1960s that her role in the development of the kitchen was beginning to be acknowledged. And only in the 1980s in Austria, which refused to acknowledge anything having gone wrong. It was always been a very right-wing area of the German areas. The Austrians were more right-wing than the Germans by and large, maybe being a bit unfair on them. But she refused to be honoured in 1988 by the Austrian president. Why do you think she refused to accept a medal from the Austrian president? Who was it at the time? Anybody? Kurt Waldheim. Do you remember that name?
Yes.
He had a very dubious wartime record in which he'd been, working with and for the Nazis. But she eventually received the award long after he left in 1992. So she held on to her principles right through her life. Now, but that wasn't the end of the story about the whole notion of women in the kitchen. I love this picture of it as well, of what the kitchen used to be like. When people talk about the drudgery of working in the kitchen, if you look at all the pictures of the time, they look quite nice. I suppose that's all that left, isn't it? It's the ones that are in museums and whatever that look actually nice and clean and tidy and not many kids floating around. Anyway, 19th century feminists became interested in the idea of housework should be being removed from the home. One American feminist in the 19th century wrote of roasted ladies, scorched and sooty from preparing the meals day in and day out, on top of raising children, doing all the hand washing and drying laundry, and sometimes juggling factory jobs outside the home, preparing 1,095 meals for the family a year, and it was regarded as absolute drudgery. Well, I think we can all sympathize with that attitude towards it. This led to some initiatives, which you might not have heard of, which I certainly not have. It sounds like a made-up name, doesn't it? Topolo Bampo and the Kitchenless House. So there were quite a lot of feminist futurist novels depicting a future with shared cooperative kitchens, getting rid of the individual kitchen. This was, there's Marie Howland, a textile worker turned architect, was inspired by a cooperative community that she'd come across in Guise, France, which was known as the Social Palace. It was built round an iron foundry, and the residents there took turns working in a shared housekeeping program, including a prepared food service for 350 workers and their families. And she wanted to set one up in the Social Palace, and she wrote a novel about it when she returned to the United States. And they even got as far as beginning to finance it in this place, which was Topolobampo, which is on the Mexican side of the American-Texas border, and looks like a rather nice place. So the plan was for small groups of kitchen-free houses, each with access to a shared kitchen, where residents would take turns working. It ran out of money. This concept was also planned out by Ebenezer Howard. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Who's the father of the garden city communities. The first one of which was the most famous one of which was in Welwyn Garden City. Yeah, Welwyn Garden City. They're places that people fight to live in nowadays, these sort of places. He actually incorporated kitchenless homes into some of his communities. He called them cooperative quadrangles. They're the shared courtyard and shared kitchens surrounded by smaller kitchenless dwellings. Well, as anybody who's lived in shared kitchen, doesn't seem to me like a brilliant idea. Why is it that you're always the one in the shared house that seems to be bothered about the washing up the most? Or I was.
Yeah.
And you'd do it, but you'd feel a great resentment in doing it. I just couldn't see a sink full of dirty stuff just left there to rot. I had
disgusting.
I think by and large, the idea of continuing the additional taxing method of rallying for a shared drudgery-free future, many women settled for a dishwashing machine. This is a comment by Kayla Stewart, who was saying that the burden of kitchen work had fallen to women, especially to Black women and women of color. She writes primarily about African-American foodways, saying, not celebrating and valuing that knowledge is adding insult to injury. The home kitchen can be a classroom, a place to connect with loved ones and family and culture. To her, the issue is more about whether or not women have a choice to be in the kitchen. I think there is some sort of truth in that. That's a picture of an Indonesian meal, by the way. It looks rather good, doesn't it? I don't know what it is. There's been quite an interesting history of all that. And I think people tend to congregate in a food eating area, don't they? So the idea of having a separate kitchen is maybe not such a brilliant idea. Whilst you might not agree with the total concept of the Frankfurt Kitchen, it certainly was very influential in the design of kitchens and the design of fitted kitchens that later came. And certainly her whole life, which was done as a member of the Austrian Communist Party and a work during the World War II and subsequent to that, was really quite remarkable. And as I said, she died almost at the age of 103. So well done to her. I thought she deserved some sort of tribute.
I remember the kitchen cabinet when I was little. Everything seemed to come out of the kitchen cabinet. So you got like doors with glass sides at the top. Then you could lower down the middle bit so you could butter your bread or whatever on that, and your pans were underneath. So everything.
I remember one of those, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'd also have display cabinets, which were in your living room, not the dining room,
Yeah.
and the things within them never got used.
No.
As kids, we usually carefully open it and get the things out and play around with them. But it was like the best crockery and whatever and things like that, or cruet set, was never got out. In our house anyway. It's gone the other way, hasn't it? You now have larger and larger kitchens, and it's like a kitchen come living area. So it's gone back to that.
But some of the new social housing has small kitchens, and in countries like Japan and China, very expensive small flats have very sort of organized kitchens, don't they, which kind of are all one room almost, you know, like your bed sits.
Yeah, or like motorhomes are. That's how the middle
Yes.
class finds out what it's like to live in a crowded kitchen.
Yeah.
But they have unbelievable gadgets, don't they, in Japan?
Yes, to help them through this. But it's
All
amazing
sorts. They
how
have
it's
things
all
they
around.
put their shoes in that disinfect them when you come in, and you just press a button, and that is unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
but
they
isn't
like to
it one of the
cooking us.
problems with other people cooking, I've found, is that they don't follow my principle, which is to clear up as you go along.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So at the end of this wonderful cooking experience, there's just a mass of dirty pans and whatever,
Yeah.
and dirty work surfaces all over the place. And rather than thinking that this is going to be a nice meal, I think I'm going to have to clear all that up. So
It's like barbecues, you know, the men are all standing around at the barbecue, and you think as if you're going to have a lovely evening off. And actually, by the time you've prepared everything and the salads and everything and cleared up, you've actually done twice as much work as if
and
you
then
were
try
just cooking
cleaning
in
out the
kitchen.
barbecue itself. It's all kind of congealed stuff, isn't it?
Oh, I don't do that. I must admit, he doesn't.
In fact, I think barbecues should be banned. I think they're ridiculous.
I often cook the stuff in the oven first and just put it on.
Now they've got gas-fired barbecues. It's like carrying an oven outside.
It's nice eating outside, but not.
Well, you can eat outside, make it inside, take it out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, but I think if you have the Australian experience where, I mean, the absolute craziness of Christmas time, around 40 to 42 degrees in the kitchen, expecting the women to produce a Christmas dinner that the Brits were used to having merely because that society has moved south. And that's why the barbecue developed and the men run it outside.
I just wanted to show you this actually.
Oh God.
Feminist response to. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's exactly that.
Take it or leave it. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, definitely.
Take it or leave it, is it?
Yeah. Tell grandchildren that.
Oh, it's like running a cafe, isn't it?
Mantra I grew up with actually, but
yeah,
I don't remember my mum ever presenting us with a menu before we ate. You know, so this is what you're having tonight. Sort of
anyway, have a good day, everybody, because it's the last minute.
Yes.
Good to see
Thank
you
you very
all.
much, Bernard.
Thank you,
Yes,
Bernard.
that's very interesting. Yeah, lovely.